Hi guys, this is Alex, and in this video I wanted to go through basically one of my sessions for learning Chinese. On the website, on our Mullen Memory website, I've written two posts about how I use memory techniques to learn Chinese. And so, if you're someone who actually wants to try this out and experiment with it and see if it works for you, I'd really recommend reading those two articles. I'll put links to them up on here somehow. Before looking at this, because this will, I'm not going to go into too much of how the techniques actually work. I'm just going to focus on how I actually, go about putting them into practice during one of the, sessions times that I'm learning Chinese. And so essentially the way I do it is I try every day. Doesn't always happen, but I try to do this daily. I'll open up a textbook. So this textbook right in front of me right here, which is called Integrated Chinese. And so I used this textbook set during college. So I took one semester of Chinese and I liked it a lot. And so I continue to use it. And so I'm using right now what is essentially the second semester Chinese book. So I'm on chapter 18. You can see here. So this is sort of what it looks like. And this particular section is about sports. And so what I'll do is I'll just go through how I'm going to learn this vocabulary for this chapter right here. So typically they have some sort of story happening here, right here, some vocabulary that goes along with that dialogue, and then a discussion of the grammar, the relevant grammar. And so, like I said, I'm going to focus on the vocabulary part of it right here and just go through how I would actually, in practice use memory techniques, at least the way I do it for Chinese, to learn this stuff. So I'm just going to go through it and kind of talk through how I would actually do it. I'm going to use Anki a lot to make the cards that I would generally use. And let's just get right into it. So the first one here is danran. So that means, of course, that's a word that I'm already pretty familiar with. I use it a lot and use it in the first semester as well. So that's not something I'm going to make a card for or make any new mnemonics for. Pang is the next one. So pang is fat. That's also one that I'm familiar with. So, we start out with ones that I actually know, which is pretty rare, but so pang is fat. And I do already have that. So the way I encoded that initially was, thinking back, I break the words down into the beginning and the ending. So the P beginning for me is the Pope. So I imagine Pope Benedict. The ang ending, ang is actually, I use sort of the neighborhood around in the city center around where I live right here for the ang ending. And then because it's the fourth tone, so pang versus pang, 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 pang. So this is pang. So the fourth tone, I tend to use basically this area around a local cups coffee shop. So I imagine one of the tables in that coffee shop, I imagine the Pope, and he's just really fat and he's just sipping the coffee and getting really, really fat. So that's the Pope in the Cups coffee shop. That gives me pang. So that's how I encoded that one. And I can just pull it up here and show you how I actually took that down. Let's just see. It's usually the easiest way. Pope, Cups. Hopefully this is actually here. Okay, here we go. There it is. So fat, chubby, pang. And then I usually like to include some sort of, example to kind of give it some context, so it's not just kind of a random word that I don't know how to use. Pang is a pretty easy one, but other things are more complicated. So you can see here, Pope at cups, and then he's at the table, and he's smacking his chubby belly. So that's pang for fat. Let's keep going. Pa. So pa is actually also one I know. So you could say like, 我害怕 is like I'm scared, or 我怕高 means I'm scared of heights. I fear heights. So P again is the Pope, and the general location I use for is this kind of small community on the edge of Lake Michigan where some of my extended family like to go during holidays and things like that. And so for the fourth tone, the pa, the I imagine a specific cottage at that place. So, I imagine Pope doing something at this cottage, and that cues me into pa. And so, to be a little more specific with it, I imagine the Pope moving along the roof of this cottage and kind of seeming scared about the height. So when I think, 很怕, like 我很怕, 我怕高, I can think about the Pope up there and how he's scared of the height and scared of falling over. So that's pa. Moving right along, okay, 简单. 简单 is also one that I actually know. It's one I learned pretty early on. And so I'll try not to go through too many examples just so this doesn't go on too long. But let me go ahead and do this one because it's got two parts to it here. So Jian. So I look at the beginning. G is I think of Jillian Michaels, and then N or An. The AN I use my hometown neighborhood, the neighborhood around my childhood house in Oxford, Mississippi. And so there's a particular part of that neighborhood that I use for the third tone. So I imagine in one of the houses in that area, I imagine Jillian Michaels sitting out in the front, and she's basically living in a, living in a very simple tent. So I just imagine, she's living very simply, living off the land. Jian is simple. And then Dan means single. So the way I look that up is, I break it down, and the way I look that up is I'll use this website a lot. So here you can see some of the system I talked about. Pope Francis here, and Jillian. Let's see here. I'll break these words down. So you can see it means simple, and then I'll cut it up like this. So Jian is simple or simplify, and then Dan is single. And so that makes a lot of sense. Single, simple, single, simple is the whole word. So Dan, for D, I imagine Dennis Reynolds from the TV show It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. And An, again, same neighborhood around my childhood. I'm in Oxford, and I'm on a particular street, and I'm imagining him kind of running down the driveway of one of them, just sort of throwing up craft singles. So that was just the first thing I thought of when I saw single. And so I put those two together. When I recall that word gendan, I will just kind of mentally teleport between those two loci and think about Jillian in the one place of the neighborhood and Dennis in the other. And that becomes very, with a few reviews, that becomes very quick and intuitive. And one of the things I like about this system is it allows me to, when I have something I know I want to set, I can very easily verify the tones. So I know Jillian is in the third tone area. I know Dennis is in the first tone area. So I know it's Jian Dan and not like, Jian Dan or something like that. So that's, a few examples right there. Okay, Pao Bu. So Pao Bu is actually is kind of a holdover from, like the very, first semester of Chinese that I took. It's a very simple phrase that a lot of people learn. So Pao Bu, I don't have any images for that. Okay, nan shou. Nan shou means hard to bear or uncomfortable. Okay, so this is one I don't really know, although I do kind of recognize both of these pieces. So nan means like, difficult. So like, hannan is very difficult. Shou. Shou can be used in a couple of things. The things that I'm remembering, because when I see shou, I think Sheldon Cooper for the beginning, and then the O, the fourth tone of O, I think of the practice fields behind my high school. And so nanshou. So I think of Sheldon there. One of the words that I learned in the past was ganshou, which means like suffering, or like it means like some sort of emotional experience. It also can be used to mean professor, like jiao shou. So I think here it might be the same character as the one meaning, suffering, emotional experience. So that makes sense. And then non-difficult. So if it's a difficult, emotional experience, difficult suffering, that seems like it would mean hard to bear, uncomfortable. That makes a lot of sense. But I'm going to go ahead and make that card because it is a new kind of phrase. So this is what I'd actually write. So nanshou. Put that. I usually put the Chinese part on the back, and then it's hard to bear, uncomfortable. And again, I briefly mentioned that I like to usually, if it's something I'm using for the first time, get some sort of example of it in a sentence, just so I have a better idea of how it's actually used in practice. So this is the dialogue that goes along with this vocab. So let me see if I can find something here. Where does it show up? There we go. It's in red right here. So 跑步太难受了. Okay, so that means, running, 跑步, tai is too, and then too hard to bear, too uncomfortable. So 跑步太难受了. So that's a pretty good one, easy way to make that Makes sense. Okay. And then just to verify the sort of reasoning that I did earlier, which may or may not be correct. Okay, I'll put it in here, and again, break it down. Nan, okay, hard, difficult, like I said, so that's the same character. And then show, so suffer. Okay, so this is the same one. So that's lucky on my part. So let me just see if I can verify that. Sheldon, outside. This is how I usually describe this location, outside east. Okay, there's professor, and there's emotional experience. Okay, so gansho. So yeah, so there it is right here. Sheldon instructing these pupils on how to play soccer. And then this is encoding a couple of words with the same sort of image. So I think of him suffering there while he's teaching the kids, trying to get them to play soccer. So nansho. So that's not too hard to understand. And I usually write in something like this when I break it down. Hard, and then suffer. So hard, suffer, hard to bear, uncomfortable. That makes a lot of sense. I'll usually just write in recall, show, east. And then let me put in some tags here. I usually will just tag my cards so I can organize them. Sports, vocab. Okay, perfect. And I'm going to change the deck. Okay, so that was the first card that I actually created for this section. Getting back here. Oops. Okay, nansho. Okay, so wangqiu. Okay, so I actually don't know this tennis, but qiu is a very common way. It means ball, and so it's a very common way of saying sports. So like saying, I play sports is da qiu, or wo da qiu. So wangqiu. Okay, so this is good. I'll make a new card here because it's something that I do not know. Tennis, wangqiu. And let's see. So it must mean something. Wang must mean something. Wangqiu. Tennis. Okay, so, net. Okay, net. Yeah, so that makes sense. Obviously, you play tennis with a net and a ball. So I'm assuming you could just say, 我大网球. Let me just check the dialogue and see what they say. Here it is. Okay, so 打网球得买网球拍. Okay, so that means, playing tennis needs, you need to buy a tennis racket. So I see here that pai means racket. So that's a perfectly good one. Let's just write that in. So you do say 打网球, just like other sports. You need to buy tennis racket. Okay. And then, so wang, so I'm not going to encode qiu because I know that means ball. Wang, so I'll use a wizard. So I think of Gandalf, that's my W. And then ang, so again, I mentioned that ang was the kind of neighborhood around here that I live. And then it's a street called State. So it's State Street, okay. Okay, you know what? So I already have an image of a wizard somewhere on State Street, and he's messing around with a net, funnily enough. And so this is actually something that I learned in the past, because wang is also used to mean like the net as in the internet. So you could say like wangjian, means like website, which literally means net station. So wangjian. Or you can say shangwang, which means to surf the web, so get on the web. Okay, so this is great. So I don't actually have to encode anything new, so I'll just say recall wizard at state. And okay, great. So moving on to the next one. Okay, I'll try to wrap this up relatively quickly here and move through the rest of it. We're kind of getting on in time. Pai, like we said, is racket, tennis racket. So I'm just going to say racket. Again, this is not something that I know. So pai, give a quick example. We already did it. Wangqiu. Or 打网球得买网球拍. Okay. And usually, I just kind of like to verify it with here just to make sure there's nothing weird going on. It's not some sort of archaic word that nobody actually uses. Let's see, beat, bat. Okay. All right. Well, I guess it's used, you know, when you talk about tennis, Wang Qiu Pai. Pai. It means racket. So I'm going to go ahead and, you know, we've had the Pope a lot, but Pope, and then I is kind of the area around my college that I went. So it's on this main street called Charles. So I'm going to go ahead and say Pope at Charles. I'm going to imagine him somewhere along this main street, just using a racket and just hitting balls. At the incoming cars. So that's a pretty easy visual to think of. So that'll be my image for rackets. Okay, 篮球. Okay, this is, you know, something I actually know already. So basketball is a common one that, you know, first semester Chinese we'd go over. So 篮球, 游泳. This is to swim, so I know this one already. So I guess because this is sports, you know, I went over a lot of the basic sports in my original semester of Chinese. So 游泳. 危险, this is not something that I know. Okay, 危险, 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 dangerous, danger. Okay, so Wei, I can't recall any images for that. Xian, I can, so I imagine Marion Jones, which is my image for she. And again, it's the an sound, it's the third tone, so that's the, you know, one of the areas in my neighborhood. And I imagine her looking at this house, and I imagine that the house is on display because it's used, it can also mean display in different cases, but it's also used to danger, and so I imagine the house kind of like falling apart, like something dangerous happening, and that's because the word, let's see if I can remember exactly, so 保险, 保险 means insurance, and so that's broken down into like protect, danger, so protect against danger is insurance. And that's xian. So I'm assuming this is the same part here. So dangerous, yeah, I assume that's the same. And then wei, I don't know. So dangerous, in danger. So literally, it means, you know, dangerous, and then dangerous, basically. So 危险. Make sure I get this right. So adjective. So it's, you know, it's not too interesting of a breakdown, but that's literally what it means. Okay. All right. So, you know, again, I'm going to use wizard, and just to quickly look. You know, I try not to encode a ton of words that maybe aren't very useful. Let me just scan down here at the usage examples and see if it comes up a lot. Okay. Yeah, it seems like it's used on its own even sometimes, so I'm going to go ahead and encode it. So, you know, Wizard Way is kind of the main city center of Oxford, the town I grew up in. So Wizard, and there's this restaurant called Bottle Tree, so that's the place that I use for the first tone. So Wizard at Bottle Tree, and then I'll give him a specific location. So let me imagine him on the opposite sidewalk. And it's very dark, and he's just kind of wandering around, and it seems very dangerous. So I'm just going to make it pretty simple here. So imagining him on this opposite sidewalk, it's very dark, he's looking around, everything seems very dangerous. So Wei Xian, I put those two together, the wizard at Bottle Tree, and then Marion Jones at this place in my neighborhood. So that means dangerous. And then again, let me just quickly add an example here. Let me find out how it's used here. Sorry, it's taken me so long to find this. Did I miss it? Okay, here it is. So 游泳, so swim, 我怕水, I fear water. It's too dangerous. So 我怕水太危险了. Okay. Oops. Oops. Okay, so that's a pretty simple example, and it means dangerous. Pretty simple, not too complicated there. All right, we're getting a little bit forward in time here, so I'll try to wrap this up soon. Okay, so 淹死 means to drown. I'm not familiar with 淹. 死 means like die or to die, so that kind of makes sense. If you're drowning, you're dying. Let me take it over to the little dictionary here. 淹死. Okay, let me try something else. They don't seem to have it here. But yen, okay, yen means flood, so that makes sense. So I'm just going to go ahead and assume that, you know, that flood, die means drown, so that makes a lot of sense. So you're dying in some sort of flood. So yen su. Okay, so it literally means flood and then die, so that makes a lot of sense. And then to add a mnemonic here, so the E, the Y-I sound, so this is actually broken down into E plus an, so that's why it's pronounced yen instead of yan. Kind of a random tidbit there, but so I imagine my grandmother Edie, so for E, Edie, and then she's going to be kind of in the area around my actual home. I'll give her a specific location, and then there's a flood. So let me think here. So I'm just going to imagine next door lawn. So I'm thinking of a specific lawn, and then imagine her sliding down a big flood that's cascading down this lawn. So so yan and then flood. Okay, so we got that. And then su is to die. I already know that one. So let's go over here, find a quick example. Okay, well, yeah, so this is sort of similar to 太危险了，淹死了怎么办? Okay, so not exactly sure what that means. Something about how to drown. How do I maybe not drown? So I can find the translation here just so I don't leave that hanging. It should be here somewhere. There it is. I'm afraid of water, it's too dangerous, what if I drown? Okay, so I guess I'm not really familiar with that, but that's what that means, and hopefully I'll kind of come to learn that sentence a little bit better. Okay, so moving forward, almost done here. Okay, yuani means to be willing. Okay, so that's also something that I do not know. To be willing. Yuani. Okay, and then let me go ahead and break this down here. Okay, to be willing to, wish, promise, meaning, expect. So E is something I recognize as like, you know, meaning or idea. Expect, so promise, expect. So if you're to be willing, I mean, if you're willing to do something, you're kind of making a promise, and there's sort of an expectation there. So that's what I'm going to sort of use semantically to understand this word. It might not be exactly how it was originally intended, but I'm just going to go with that. So promise, you know, there's a promise and an expectation. If you're willing, you know, to be willing to do something. So let's check out the example here. 我也没办法了，愿意运动. Okay. So 运動 means exercise. So you're not willing. 你不愿意运動. 运動 means you're not willing to exercise. So that's nice and simple. And then, like I said, I already kind of am familiar with this E part here. But you know, I don't really have a good idea that it means expect. But I'm going to go, you know, sometimes I try to be a little fast and loose, not too rigid with it. So I'm going to go ahead and leave that one off for now and hope that it just kind of sticks without it. I'm going to focus on this yuan part here. So yu is Yoda for me. And then an, same neighborhood I've been talking about, but it's more towards this other area, more towards the highway. Okay, so there's a kind of a row of trees here. And I'm just going to imagine him willing, or should I do promise? Okay, so I'm just going to imagine that he's sort of, you know, Yoda is sitting atop this really giant tree up there, and I'm just going to think about, you know, the fact that he's made some sort of promise and he's willing to jump off of this tree. So I can just imagine him maybe saying like, you know, willing I am, in his sort of Yoda voice, willing I am. And so imagine came up on that tree there. So that'll be that. So 你不愿意运动. Okay. So I believe that wraps it up. That went on a little bit long. And I hope at least it helps you get a sense of how I actually go about, using these techniques in practice, breaking down words, recalling, these words using images. This is essentially how I do it. I create these cards here, these Anki cards, and then I'll come back and each day, or I try to do it each day. Each day I'll review them in Anki, review the cards that I made, so they stick using a spaced repetition style there. So that's just me going through these vocab words. I'll spend other days, every like third day or so, I'll do the vocab, and then the other 2 days I'll either spend reading this again, reading the dialogue, trying to understand it, or going through the grammar here. So that's essentially my entire process, the process that I use at least right now for using memory techniques to learn Chinese. So I hope you guys found that helpful.